So we've been talking about stewardship last couple of weeks. We'll do it again next week. What is it? What's stewardship? Tell me. Oh, that's a great answer. Stewardship is taking care of taking care of what doesn't belong to you. And why do we talk about that here? When we talk about stewardship, what are we usually talking about? Yeah, money, right? And one of the things we say is that what God has given to us is our responsibility to deal with. And part of the way we do that is to give to the church. So we've been talking about that. And we've been using the UCC theme, which I think I have here. Let me get my remote. The UCC theme is we're on a journey towards generosity, that we want to get to a point in life where we're more generous than we are. And we are saying this, that a journey is a place that you have to know where you're going. We talked about that last week. And this week, you have to know what to leave behind. Anybody here ever moved? Yeah. And sometimes you leave things behind when you move, don't you? You get rid of things because you know you can't take everything with you. So we leave things behind on these journeys sometimes. And that's tricky enough just with clothing and furniture to try to figure out what you want to keep and what you want to let go of. But it gets more complicated when you're trying to figure out what spiritually you want to hold on to and what you want to let go of. And so that's why I use this passage of Scripture, and the title of my sermon is Hold the Onions. So Darby read this story really well, and I hope you heard it, but Moses is leading the Israelites out of slavery, and they're out in the middle of this desert. They're out there because they haven't gotten to the promised land yet, and while they're out there in the desert, they are eating manna, whatever it is, we don't know. Do you know what the actual the meaning of the word manna, where it comes from? It's the Hebrew word for, what is it? And no, they just knew that when they got it, when they collected it, it appeared overnight, and when they collected it, it was good to eat. And so they were eating this, but they're eating it, and they're eating it, and they're eating it, and I don't care how delicious it is. If you eat it every day, 3 times a day, you're going to get tired of it after a while. So that's what was going on in here. And the people began to complain about this. They complained so much that Moses, who's trying to lead them, gets ticked off about it. And he says he's just furious with them. He talks to God about it. The people said that they could no longer go on if they were only going to have this manna to eat. There was no way that they could do it. And Moses began to understand that there was a problem here. He began to understand that there was something that they had forgotten about. First of all, they wanted onions. Who loves onions? Raise your hand if you're an onion lover. Okay, so that's about half of us. I like onions too. And when they're out there in the middle of the desert eating this manna, one of them starts thinking, somebody, probably more than one, you know, once we get this mashed up, if we just had a couple of onions to drop in there and stir it in, wouldn't that be better? And then he got talking about how they used to have all the onions they wanted back in Egypt. I don't know why there was onions that they wanted, onions and cucumbers. Melons I get, onions and cucumbers, I could leave them behind, I suppose, cucumbers anyhow, but they wanted them. And one of the things Moses realized was that these people were not ready to be their own people, not ready to be free, as long as they wanted what they had when they were slaves. Remember, the price of the onions was their slavery. They were not free people. They were ready, some of them, to say, you know what, it really wasn't that bad. Let's go back and be slaves again, and then we can have all the onions and cucumbers we want, and we, and get out of this place in the desert where they're eating manna. And Moses realized there's no way these people are ready to go forward as long as that's what they want. And they were also looking for security too. I used to say this. I used to say that what people wanted most of all was money. And I realized that eventually I realized the reason people wanted money is because money is power, right? And it's not money that people want. People would give it up if they had power. So people wanted power. And then my friend Chris said, you know, people don't want power. People want security. That's the number one thing that people want. And they want power only because they feel they can become secure if they have power. And you all know that, right? There are times in your life where you have felt insecure, and times when you felt secure. And insecurity is a hard thing to be. And Moses realizes that as long as these people want security more than they want freedom, they're never going to be free. They weren't ready to move on yet. They had to give up this desire for this false security of slavery in order to be free again. So he says you've got to give up your slavery. Now, that is 2 quick sermons. And here are, 4 more. And you get to pick. When I get out of rehab is number 1. Oops, not funny is number 2. An unexpected party is number 3. And down by the riverside is number 4. Which one shall I do? The unexpected party. All right. The unexpected party is the title of a chapter of a book. And what book is it? No. Oh, I'm very disappointed in you people right now, I have to say. Yes, who said that? The Hobbit. Thank you. It is the first chapter of the book The Hobbit. Now, who's read The Hobbit? Not enough, all right? So we're at 100%. Yeah, go read this. The Hobbit is a great book, one of the great books of all time. And that's the title of the first chapter. The story of The Hobbit is about a fat, comfortable, fairly wealthy hobbit with no ambition and no desire to be anything other than the humble little hobbit that he was. We all know what a hobbit is, right? Well, if you don't worry about it. It doesn't really matter. He's a hobbit and he's comfortable and he's just had his second breakfast because nobody would only eat one breakfast in a day. He's just had his second breakfast when there comes a knock on the door, and the next thing you know, he's got an apartment full of strangers, mostly dwarves from the mountains, and he finds the next day that he is off on an adventure he never planned to go on. Off he goes out into the desert, into the woods, with these dwarves to go someplace to fight a dragon. He has no idea. And as he's going off on this and he's running to catch up because they all left already without him, as he's running to catch up, he realizes with horror that he has left his handkerchief behind. He never expected ever to go out of his house without a handkerchief, much less on an adventure. And how many of you have had your life turn out just like you thought it was going to? I suspect no one. Jesus did this to people all the time. What was Peter before Jesus met him? What did Peter expect his life was going to be? Fishing, yes. What was Matthew? Anybody know what Matthew was? A tax collector. And what did Matthew think he was going to retire from? Tax collecting. This was their expectation for this. Nicodemus was a respected person in the country. He assumed he was always going to be a respected person. What happened to him was he met Jesus, he had a conversation, and he began to talk about the things that Jesus said, and the respect other people had for him started to decline. The story of Jesus meeting people is the story of people whose lives suddenly got sent in another direction. And there is no way that you can follow Jesus without understanding that something in your life has got to change. And I don't know what it is, but there is no way that you are going to go down the same path you thought you had. Listen, I had to change denominations when I became, when I was following the way of Jesus. And that probably doesn't seem like a big deal to you because a lot of you have done that, right? How many of you have been in a different kind of church than you are right now? Okay, so most of you have, but I couldn't do that without all kinds of issues for myself and my family and my future. It was a big change for me, and I had to do it. I had to do it because that was the way that Jesus called. And there is no way to follow Jesus, simply no way, without an unexpected party and a change in the way you thought you would go. Okay, number 2. Which one? Down by the riverside. We'll save that one for last. Which one? Got to go with rehab. Okay. This is a tough one.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's my own fault. I put it up there. So, when people get out of rehab or prison, what's the difficulty that they find ahead of them?
The world has changed without them.
Okay, so we hear that. There's a lot of problems, a lot of things. The world has changed, and that's true. If they've been in a long time, they have. If you get out of rehab, The problem you have is that the world has not changed. In the 90 days you've been in rehab, the world has not changed. So you come out, and where are you when you come out? You're different, but what about the world you come back into?
Same old place.
Same old place. Same old place. And very likely, and this is particularly true for people dealing with alcoholism or drug addiction, very likely you are in the middle of a circle of friends who encourage your addiction. And that can't stay. You are never going to be free of your addiction if you are continuing to live with the friends that you had who led you into that in the first place. And one of the hard things that happens is sometimes on the journey of life you have got to leave some people behind. You may have in your life a person who is so toxic to you, so dangerous to you, that you cannot stay with them. And this is hard for me to talk about because one of the things we encourage, and one of the things I encourage as a pastor is make your relationships work. Hold on to each other. Try to get it together. Try to find a way to live with it. But sometimes there are people in your life so destructive of where you need to go, so likely to pull you off of the path you need to be on, that you have to leave them behind. And that is not an easy thing to do. If you come to that part in life, that can be tough. And yet it may be what you have to do. Which one? I've only got one left, right? Yeah, not funny. Oh, I hate this one. So I went on to Facebook one day, and a friend of mine posted a note. And the note said this. It said, here's a fun game for everybody. Pretend that you just woke up in the mental health ward of a hospital, and I'm looking at you. What 4 words would you say to me? And people began to put down their answers. And they were pretty funny. I put down Dr. Livingston, I presume. Somebody else put your room, my room. Wasn't clear about that. And it was good. And the list got longer and longer. I love when I put stuff on Facebook and people get involved with it. And the list kept going longer and longer and longer. And then my friend Anita wrote, and here's what she said. She said, I have a child who has dealt with this. I have a child who has been hospitalized for mental health care. And I have seen the pain and the agony that she goes through. And when people make jokes about it, it continues the stigma that is placed on people who have mental health problems. And you know what? She's right. And I'm wrong. And I didn't like the fact that I was so publicly wrong. But I had to say something about it. And I took the post down and I explained to people why. I said, she's right. I don't want to be the person who causes pain for someone else. There are people in our congregation who struggle with mental health issues. And I don't want to be the reason that that it's worse for you than it is. So what I'm saying is I had to change the way I was thinking. I had to let go of something and recognize that I was in a different spot than I thought I was. And there is no way you are going to follow Jesus anywhere in life without changing the way you think about things. St. Paul got knocked off his horse right in the middle of the desert and had to change his entire way of life, or we would have never heard of him. You're going to have the same experience if you haven't already, and if you have, it's going to happen again, because the process of this journey that we're on is continuous. And that leads me to down by the riverside. I'm tired out, folks. Aren't you tired out? The shooting in Texas and all the arguments that go with that. We are constantly at war, it seems, with each other. And sometimes I know that my life has felt like a battle, a war, and I look forward to the day when I can quit that. And I believe that day is out there, where God calls us all together down by the riverside, and we can just let it go and lay it down.
You've been listening to a sermon by Reverend Stephen Carnahan, pastor of High Street Congregational Church in Auburn, Maine. If you feel inspired by what you hear, you're invited to join us in person for worship services every Sunday morning, starting at 10 o'clock. Of course, you can always listen to Steve's sermons on the web. New sermons are posted every Monday by midday. Please explore this website for more information about our church, or visit our Facebook page at High Street Congregational Church, UCC, where you'll find the video version of Steve's sermons as well. We hope that God's presence will be known to you every hour of every day. May God's blessings rest upon you now and always. See you next week.